Welcome to today's jam session titled Connections, Fun in the New York Times, but Essential for Evolving Your Analytics and AI Apps. I personally take connections every day. Wordle too. It's a fun distraction and far less stressful than reading the rest of the New York Times. But there's another set of connections out there that organizations rely on every day. And those are the ones that connect their data sources to their analytics and AI apps. Adapters, ETL scripts, APIs, connectors, data services, many names, very rich set of capabilities deployed over many, many years. It's a critical data integration capability, and it's essential to your to driving business value from your data. Sometimes these are custom developed, sometimes they're purchased, but every organization has thousands, if not tens of thousands of these connectors. And, they run your business. And running is a key word because these connections fail, so too does your business. And the interesting thing is they're sort of set it and forget it. They just sort of run. And, that can kind of lull organizations into thinking, well, we've got our connections and maybe we're fixing a few on the margin to add some new apps and that sort of thing. But that strategy, that passive strategy, may be limiting. And so what we want to talk about today are some of the ever-changing features and factors in the market, what's happening, things that might help you think about your connections in a new way and be in shape for the future. So really, is it time to rethink how we connect our data and our apps? And I think the answer is yes. And so we brought together this panel today to help you evaluate and understand what's really going on with new technologies and how leaders should be evolving their integration strategy. So we've brought together three experts today. Richard Winter, who's the CEO and principal architect at Winter Corp. Denodo's Terry Dorsey, and Informatica's Amal Dongre. Welcome, everybody. Let's go around and tell us each a little bit about yourself, your organization, and your role there. Why don't we start with you, Richard?
Oh, hi. So I'm Richard Winter, founder and leader of Winter Corp, and we're data architects. Mainly, we help customers with analytic data challenges, typically around scale, with their most critical architecture decisions that often involves selecting the data platform or working out the data architecture. And increasingly, this is about AI today.
Great. Thank you for that. Amal, tell us about you.
Yeah, this is Amol Dongre. I lead the data integration product management for Informatica. I'm a long timer at Informatica. I would say 20 plus years at Informatica. And I don't think there has been any day during those where I have not talked about connections with somebody. So I think it's a very important topic here.
Yeah, Informatica is certainly well known. Terry, you're from Denodo. Tell us about you and Denodo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Terry Dorsey. I am the Senior Data Architect and Evangelist for North America for Denodo. Denodo represents a logical data fabric. I spent 40 years in industry, and this is my my first entree into this type of space. And the idea behind that is to help our customers and prospective customers to understand how you can simplify your access to data, governance, and security, leveraging a logical data fabric.
Great. So connections, more connections.
Yeah.
Well, great. Let's dive in. Maybe we'll start with the first question, kind of take it up really high level at the business strategy kind of area. Why do anything? Why now? That's, before we start onto the what to do. So Amal, what do you see out there in terms of businesses, and what's really changing in the business models that's causing this need for new connection strategies?
Yeah, I think we see that all the time, and there are cases where we deal directly. I mean, I deal directly with as part of product management, but we also see it around us, right? So depending on how radical the change is, say we talk about Netflix 12 years ago when they moved from DVDs to streaming. I think when somebody make that kind of a change, it's going to give rise to a lot of new data they're going to have to analyze for to even figure out how their business is running, right? How are their sales, how is their customer engagement. um, it's completely new, different connections than before. Now what you're getting from physical mail is maybe not that critical now for them, and so on. So such a change would involve a complete radical change in what types of connections you're going to have to work with, and what kind of data you need to obtain from there, and so on. And then there are other changes. I'm using some recent example, for example, Southwest recent announcement. I'm pretty sure the data about check-in bags has always been there in Southwest system, but now it is a revenue source. So now they have to really analyze that thoroughly well. Plus, they have to correlate it to whether there is any customer retention issues or whether there is any higher boarding times now because people carrying all those large cabin bags uh, without checking those in and so on. So I think it will vary based on the extent of radicalness of the business model change. And I'm just using practical examples rather than MBA terminology here. But there is one thing I just want to highlight. If that evolves, some offshoot decisions like I'm going to close my data center completely, I think that's going to just completely radically change everything for customers, because now everything goes to cloud, and now suddenly you are talking about firewalls and private links and whitelisting and all of that, right? So I wouldn't envy in any security team of any company these days, but I think that's what people have been dealing with. And I think any change, no higher or smaller, will impact how you deal with connections. That's what my take is.
Terry, what about from your point of view? You're out there evangelizing and dealing with the customers that are on the leading edge. What do you see in terms of the business drivers that are motivating these potential changes in their connection strategy?
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly new ones, particularly with the advent of AI and a lot of the opportunities around real-time access to information, which certainly puts a lot of, I would say, challenges around how you actually deliver that information. But I've always taken the perspective that you take a step up, right? And this idea of virtualization allowing you to decouple how you actually run your business and give access to information from those sources. And so maintaining of that being separated from the actual consumption of it. We find with quite a few customers that taking this approach allows a lot of stability within the organization and the ability to adopt new technologies that come around. AI and generative AI being one of those.
Okay, so AI is on everybody's top of everybody's list, but just in general, all the business continues to evolve, and therefore the data needs evolve, and therefore maybe a more decoupled, virtualized strategy can be a useful approach to provide that agility. Richard, how about you? You've been doing this a long time, the first databases and things like that, and to just even get basic information about marketing or finance. Things have changed a lot. What do you see now? You mentioned AI.
I'm seeing a lot of AI too, and real time. As was just mentioned, a great example I just was working with is there's a grocery retailer that has introduced smart shopping carts into their stores, and the shopping carts monitor in real time where the customer is in the store, what they've put into the shopping basket, and what's going on in the store in terms of product placement and promotions and so on. And the goal of this is to elevate the shopping experience and help the customer solve the little problems they encounter while shopping. So, for example, if you put 2 ingredients into your cart that suggest you might be making a quesadilla, it will ask you if that's what you're doing, give you the other ingredients for the recipe, help you find them in the store, suggest the brands that you like because it knows who you are, and tell you if there are specials for any of these ingredients. So all those things help the customer and save time. And every single aspect of this involves a separate source of data. You know, there's data on the customer, on the store, on the shopping, and there are probably 7 or 8 different sources of data involved in these real-time decisions. And in this case, the data is all brought together at the enterprise data platform, which is, and the new integration is between the AI tool, in this case Azure ML, and the data platform. And I think one of the major changes going on in architecture is this integration between the AI world and the enterprise data platform world. So there are integrations with the tools. There are things like bring your own model. There's Gen AI. There's machine learning going on inside the data platforms. There's vector embedding in the data platform, similarity search. All these are new things, changing architecture and kind of making additional use of data connections which already exist, rather than it's not so much changing the way data connections occur as changing the place where it's used.
I mean, I'd like to add to that if I can, right? So, I totally agree, right? So this idea of these disparate connections, they're at the very low level. And when we actually talk about getting value, we're talking about the representation of things that are in our enterprise and the ability to actually interact with them. We have one customer that they have a virtual representation of a package. And this is accumulation of various sources throughout throughout their enterprise organization. But there's this ability for all aspects of the organization to interact with that one entity, regardless of where those connections are coming from. And you can extend that to things like AI and other things that take on into the organization, like integration and planning, and the ability to leverage that one thing, right, throughout all of these different activities that occur in the enterprise.
Want more Insight Jam? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for shorts, panels, podcasts, and more. In your shorts feed, enjoy a daily dose of best practices from tech experts and leading solution providers, while long-form panel discussions and keynotes, recorded live every quarter, go deep on important industry topics. And don't miss our collection of regular podcasts, keeping you informed on the latest trends. We're hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so subscribe to be notified of our next upload. Now, let's get back to the show.
This brings us kind of halfway into our second question, which is some of the technology innovations that are now available that allows us to revolutionize how we connect data. Let's talk about, Richard, you listed a couple: similarity search, Gen AI, new platforms. Why don't you repeat, let's kind of go through build a checklist together of some of the technology innovations that are opening new opportunities and new ways of attacking this, connections issue.
Okay, so, in that particular realm, this is just one of several that I think are relevant. It's AI in the data platform. And so we have vector embedding. So these the magic done by large language models is largely done by vectorizing data and doing similarity search on it. And in the beginning, we mostly saw this happening with respect to the internet. All the information on the internet was digested into these language models. But what's coming now is within enterprises, we'll want to apply the large language models to our enterprise data and enterprise document stores. And this is the technology that makes that possible. So that's one change. Another one is many companies have been using classic machine learning for 15 or 20 years on their data, but it's mostly been done by running the training and the inferencing outboard in data science workbenches or special data science tools. And that's fine at small to moderate scale. At larger scale, it has to happen closer to the data. So now this is moving inside data platforms as well, which also makes the machine learning capabilities, I think, more widely available. So an implication of both of these developments that I think goes back to our central issue on the panel is the availability of these AI technologies is going to make data accessible to much larger audiences. So if you have a few thousand people in your organization who touch the data every day now, in a few years, you'll probably have 10 or 50 times as many because of the ability to use natural language or to have the new AI apps, which will be deployed, will be intelligently using the data in so many more ways. And so we have a much wider audience making use of the data, which was before used more by specialists.
Yeah.
So this brings us into all the issues about getting the meaning of the data right and the context of the data right and all those other questions.
Wow, those were three biggies. Amal, you were shaking your head positively through as he was going through that list. Would you add anything to those lists?
Yeah, because it was totally resonating with what we see among our customers also. I totally agree with the democratization, right? The ability to access data that's going to be available for larger and larger user base within companies due to AI. So that is one technological innovation for sure that has an impact. I'm very tempted to bring in AI agent so early in this discussion, but there is something else. I would also emphasize on curated data products. That terminology has been seen recently a lot, and we hear a lot about sharing of data, but I think sharing of curated data will be of utmost importance going forward. Sharing of raw data isn't much useful because of the meaning that Richard mentioned, right? That it needs to be user consumable. It needs to be understood by any user who has no context of the internal implementation of the data and so on. So somebody has to curate it and then make it available. And I think that will become very important. So once data is curated, all those cryptic codes are taken off, all the internal IDs are hidden from the user, or you're bringing up user-friendly names of terms. All the business rules that are not applied on the heavy normalized data in the source system are now applied before making the data available to user and so on. All that needs to happen, and then when the data is made available to the users, it will make more sense to a lot of users who have no idea about how this is stored in the source system. Now that's where I think AI agents could come in, and it's early days. I know it's too early to just make very definitive remarks about what they could do. But so far, when it was tried before, it was largely in rigid form, where somebody says, okay, I'm going to create all these business adapters like things from SAP, Oracle, and those systems, and you can just put those and they will just give you all the data. But they don't factor in the customizations companies do, and some of them are heavily customized. So somebody has to then go and change it, and it has seen mixed success. But I think that's where AI agents can play a lot of role, because they will be grounded to what the company's nuances are, their business rules, how they look at data, and so on. So I think that could be the biggest innovative technical innovation that could change it, but it remains to be seen how that plays out really.
So sum that up, it's probably AI agents enabling a more intelligent curation. So dealing with the complexity of the semantics, the complexity of the metadata, the resolving the meanings, etc., and somehow presenting that in some sort of consumable catalog, which, as Richard talked about, that has a natural language front end that enables mere mortals to find and understand this stuff.
I think that's something really,
yeah, that's right in your sweet spot, right, Terry? I mean,
Yeah. Like, so, there's two angles that I want to come at this. One is when we talk about a lot of the generative AI initiatives, we've heard about the vector embedding and the similarity search. Well, there's a complementary portion to that, and that's text to SQL based off of simplified abstractions of the enterprise. So imagine having a customer and a loan and be able to ask questions to those objects. Text to SQL works very well in concert with the vector embedding because similarity search is not going to give you a lot of the analytic information that you may need that text to SQL can give you, right? So if I want to know how many customers I have in a region, text to SQL is going to give it to me. If I want to know about those customers and some things similarly, I can get that from a similarity search. And now I have this really comprehensive delivery of information that I can act on through AI. If we also take that to the space of AI agents in general, right? There's this idea of being able to have them help operationalize the enterprise. And again, the most succinct way to do that is to create these abstractions of the enterprise and let these AI initiatives have access to those. And this is where abstraction comes into play in that space, giving you access for all types of consumers, be they AI or business users. Because I think today, much of how we look at data and how we work with data has changed. And there's gray areas now between what business users can do in the reporting space or AI. We have these gray areas where it's no longer just integration or just analytics. Now it's this comprehensive usage of information throughout the enterprise, and the ability to share the enterprise is gonna be a differentiator for a lot of companies.
that's great. Thank you, Terry. It's so interesting that some of these things, it's like what's old is new again, right?
Yes.
SQL, still relevant. Oh, I remember my first day at Oracle. Anyway, the thing that's interesting here, some of these what's old is new again. We used to, when a lot of these ideas were initially coming together, and I know, Richard, you were right there, and we were going to build these data warehouses, and we're going to get that schema right, and then we're going to call up Informatica and write those ETLs, and then we're going to get some business, objects or Cognos or something to read it, and we're going to lock all this down and control it, and all of that. But then we couldn't put everything in one place. And what wasn't that was the warehouse, right? And then the cloud became one of those, hey, let's just put everything in the cloud and it's all going to be great. Well, did that ever did the cloud lessen the connections challenge, or what did it do to the connections challenge? Let's start with you, Terry. What do you did? Just put it in the cloud and everything's going to be fine, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I think there are definitely advantages of moving things into the cloud. As far as maintenance and serverless and being able to scale and manage your workloads and your persistence, that's really great. But when it comes to the actual presenting or providing of information, it actually exacerbated the problem in that we have multi-clouds, we have hybrids, we have things that are still on-premise, and we have things that are in different SaaS solutions. So our data kind of became more disconnected across wider areas. And this is why, the way to get around that is to be able to have these versions or logical versions of your enterprise objects so that you can maintain that consistency across your enterprise, be it for integration or planning or artificial intelligence.
Great, thank you, Richard. You said with some of your architectures that you're using, it has the cloud, and cloud. You're trying to make cloud an advantage. You talked about in a case with the AI tools from Azure, and then I'm sure the storage is at Azure as well. So the idea of centralizing everything like the old data warehouse model, maybe not appropriate for the cloud, but the cloud's still useful.
Absolutely. And but I think data ecosystems are continuing to grow and often be more distributed. ironically, in the cloud. In the cloud, in principle, you could centralize, but in reality, what's happening is the cloud is enabling a lot of autonomy across organizations, and especially globally distributed organizations. So you have people in many locations creating their own data stores, their own data products. You have distributed data ecosystems where you have virtual access to many different data stores, maybe through one interface. You have so you have data, as you mentioned, on-prem and in the cloud and in multiple clouds. So in a way, the complexities are just continuing to mount. Now, the cloud does mean everything's physically connected or readily physically connected. That's one advantage, but it doesn't by itself eliminate any of the semantic issues. And, I think that the biggest issue that many companies face now is given AI and sort of an increasing ability to use data in so many ways, how do you ensure that the business user who has a business problem to solve first gets to the right data to solve that problem, and second, gets the context to interpret that data successfully to solve that business problem or take that business action? That's the big challenge. I think the one that very closely relates to this issue that that the panel is about is how do we connect, how do we get all these data connections? And that's not only physical question, that's a semantic question, the data connection question.
Thanks, Richard. I know Informatica has done great by moving stuff, helping people move stuff into the cloud and then reintegrating it and that sort of thing. And really, I think we're almost talking about the hope or the desire for centralization and control. We had it in the EDW, then the cloud. But that's I think both Terry and Richard said that's not really happening. We're getting more and more sources. So really, the connections challenge is exacerbated by the cloud. Would you agree with that, Amol?
Yes, I definitely agree with that. And I was going to also point about that instead of reducing the number of connections you have to deal with, it has definitely increased. One reason is among our customers, mostly we see the world as hybrid. It's not everything in cloud yet. There's a lot on-prem, and some may never go to cloud, or it may go, but it may go as a lift and ship. So it's just the connection URL that is different now, but it's the same system sitting on the cloud now, like on an Amazon or an Azure instance or so, something like that. So that is one aspect of it. The other challenge we see is that because most of it has been lift and shift, if there was a lot of fragmentation before, that fragmentation is now on cloud. Nothing has consolidated. So if you had two separate applications, one for HR and one for CRM, customers will tend to first move them as is to cloud rather than force some kind of a merging there. So it's not going to be replaced by a single ERP sitting on cloud, hence reducing your number of connections and so on. That hasn't happened, and I doubt that will ever happen. There is some consolidation due to mergers and acquisitions, but that's more for the companies to merge, and the API level or the connection level, there hasn't been any consolidation yet. So yes, it has significantly increased the number of connections and the kinds of data you have to deal with, and so on, even for our customers.
So little kind of a different tact here from the prepared questions. As we talk about all this integration and the more and more sources and more, and we've also talked about more and more users and types of users, AI users and this kind of users. The many-to-many problem is expanding exponentially. I know, Terry, and some of the best practices out of data virtualization, there's a kind of a 3-layer model that you guys advocate to kind of help decompose the many-to-many problem. Can you spend a moment and kind of explain to the audience what some the architecture and some of the principles behind that kind of decoupled approach to the data services or connections?
Right. I mean, I can talk through my own experiences when I'm at a organization where I used to work, right? And this idea of decoupling means that, let's just take it as a given, right? That the organization is going to shift and change, either through, through cloud migrations, business transformations, whatever. And we also understand that we have many types of users that require different protocols, and that is even opening up the candidates now or everybody in the organization. And so the idea is, how can you design what that actually looks like? And in a virtualization in the middle, you can actually design what the products are that people are interacting with, secure them, and determine how they're actually accessed. You have this illusion of centrality, even though you still have this decentralized ecosystem that's changing. However, the interaction with the enterprise is through that virtual layer, which is consistent, managed, governed, and secure. So you can imagine. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, you might have you've rationalized some customer entities.
Yeah.
Or some product entities. I don't want to use the word product because then we were talking about data products, and that's kind of meta. But maybe some shipment.
Correct. Right. So enterprise entities, like a shipment a shipment looks like a shipment, right? There's certain things that make a shipment. So you can design it. You can have deliveries, you can have sales orders, you can have employees, you can have customers, and you can design what they are in their logical representation, and you can source them for regardless of where the attributes are in the organization. And if you think about it, this goes back to traditional data architecture, where part of that effort was to design these logical models so that people understood how to interact with your business. And the idea of being able to reflect that in this abstracted layer means that all of your consumers can benefit, regardless of how sophisticated or naive, quote unquote, those users are within the organization.
Okay, but that's a big problem. We have lots of sources. We have, a shipment. Well, a shipment in SAP and a shipment in Oracle inventory, or and whatever else is in your supply chain, your third party vendors. Just so versions of that, standardizing to what the shipments are, and then giving all the shipments that he needs for supply chain optimization, and give Richard the shipments he needs in order to handle a customer satisfaction query. There's a different version of a shipment and different consuming app, and that sort of thing. So it's a complex problem. Can't we just use AI agents to just point them at this and make it all work? We ready for that, Richard?
Well, I think they can contribute to the solution, but they don't automatically solve the problem. So AI agents, like people, need context in order to interpret data, to the extent that they're capable of doing that. And so the issue is, I guess, creating this business context, applying it to the right places, and maintaining it and making it available. This is what data governance programs at their best try to achieve. They try to get really everyone in the enterprise to collaborate on collecting and maintaining and curating information about business knowledge and the meaning of the data and the lineage of the data and the uses of the data, all those questions. So some of that, and those programs, they're hard to carry out successfully. It's hard to get the buy-in from everyone throughout the organization that you need to collect and maintain the information. It's hard to get the work done of collecting and updating information. And so some of the drudgery involved maybe can be delegated to AI mechanisms. But I think the leadership um, to make this important and figure out how to do it and get people involved, that remains a human challenge, at least in my opinion.
Amal, thank you, Richard. Amal, let's kind of break this. I said AI agents can do everything, but let's break down what they can do. What is you look at, let's just think of I'll just put out a simple process. First of all, we have to identify the data.
Yeah.
We need to understand it. We need to rationalize it or resolve it in some sort of way. And then we need to build objects, abstract data services, models, connectors, etc. And then supply it. Right. That's a simple value chain for doing that. What's possible today from AI agents, and you're in this world all the time. So what's possible in that process of identification, understanding, resolve, rationalize, build, and supply?
I think the way Richard was mentioning, there is a lot of data governance. There is a metadata layer that needs to to exist for the AI agents to leverage a lot of that information, so that any decisions or any task assignments the agent does is grounded to the organization and the ways the organization does it. It might sound very abstract, but here is where I'm coming from. First thing is, if you're going to train any model using your company's business data or fine tune the model using business data, that data needs to be as processed or as correct as it was required, say, for even a classical data warehouse. Maybe not the dimensional modeling aspects are required, that's fine, but the curation of data itself is required for sure, the preparation, the transformations, and so on. Otherwise, you will be, even the model will understand, or it will give you answers based on incorrect data, which is not good. So that is one important aspect that the agent has to be able to leverage. The other aspect is all the so there is, as I mentioned, the metadata catalog, the governance aspects about who is authorized to use what data and all that has to feed into the agent. And I think with all those in place, it sounds like, or at least, and I say it sounds like because it's still early days. I haven't come across anybody who has implemented it at that level of complexity, that you can tell an agent that I want to pull out a report of might be very simple example, but region-wise sales where there are too many returns or something like that, and it is able to magically translate it into the database or the data warehouse query it needs to issue, and then club it or put it together with something else that needs to obtain from real-time data or data lake or something like that, and put it all together in a meaningful way that you can actually rely on enough to make a business decision based on that. It has to be very accurate. So there are some challenges also with it. First thing is that metadata has to be very accurate for it to give you a correct result. And then there is this aspect of non-deterministic behavior of AI itself, where you can't still assume that it's going to give you the same answer exactly every time. So I think it's still not completely clear there. I don't believe we are at a place where you can just give it to it and it will give you the right answer.
Okay, thank you, Mal. So Terry, in the process of kind of going from identifying the data from the source, starting at the source, identifying, understanding, resolve, rationalize, build, supply, are there parts of that process now where there's agents inside that could help with some of that activity that would be traditional data integration, grind it out? Well, drudgery. Richard used the word drudgery.
So in my experience, I looked at it at different parts, and as you alluded to earlier, layers, right? And so if we adhere to design principles, there is this concept of generalization, right? And generalization tells us that we can build generalized things that we can then leverage higher up. And when those generalized things become these entities in the enterprise, we can now leverage those to impugn logic and questioning. And we have some customers that actually leverage that approach, where they can build these entities on objects, and in some instances, data services, where they can actually ask questions to those objects because they're based off these design simplified models, therefore increasing the accuracy of getting the types of responses that you need. I'm always of the opinion that when you like the concepts like abstraction and generalization, when they're applied in the enterprise, even especially in the data management space, that is where you get the power of first of all disseminating information across the organization, allowing everybody to participate in it. One of the companies that I worked with previously, we were able to create an artificial intelligence process, I guess, where we actually distributed out to a large user base in our community. And that was on the premise that we could supply the enterprise in an abstracted form and that those models could continually learn based off secured information. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunities in that space, but I think where we need to actually get our arms around things is this idea of simplification and consolidating streams of work, right? So now a lot of companies will have analytics team, they have integration team, they have application development teams, and we're all going after the same information in different modes. And so the idea of, what is a good practice, and we have several customers that put this in practice, is this idea is abstract the enterprise and let everybody consume it based off of the security through it. So you get this illusion of centrality, you give autonomy to your business consumers, and you can manage the change in your organizational ecosystem. And all of these can be separated out and decoupled.
Unlock better leads through Solutions Review events.
Welcome to Data Demo Day. Expert Roundtable, Solution Spotlight featuring Monte Carlo, Cohesity, Denodo, Cloudflare, High Gear, Broadcom, NextThing.
Boost your brand with a webinar that shares comprehensive use cases, real-time product demos, and an interactive Q&A. All broadcast live to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Zoom from our Boston studio, or even on location. Fill your sales funnel with high-quality targeted leads. And contact us today by visiting solutionsreview.com/virtual events.
Richard, what do you think about what Terry just said?
I think it's a very promising approach. But I think we do still need to be mindful of the fact that there's this phenomenon I see over and over again in customer organizations where the people who build the data systems and solutions don't have the business knowledge to interpret the data that the consumers of the data have. And I see, people who work very hard to build data warehouses and things like that and proudly deliver the solution to the business users. And the users take one look at the data in the first dashboard they see, and they say, this data can't possibly be right, and they're using their business knowledge of the data, and they're seeing something that those who created and tested the solution didn't know about as a criteria. And so you need this sort of, no matter how good this structure you create, you need this active participation of the business in getting the data values to be correct for their purpose. That's, I think, one of the biggest hurdles in delivering real impact from data solutions.
Yeah, I was nodding because it reminded me of an example at a previous company where the IT system, there was a order line table, and initially it was all clean design because there was apparently a certain types of orders that table was designed for. And then something changed in the business and they came up with some kind of an indirect order, and IT guys tried to cram that data also into the same table, but now the calculation of the tax test was different. And because it was heavily normalized, they would not pre-calculate the tax amount and store in the table because it can be calculated using the other fields from the table, and nobody would do that. Then there were returns, and the return amount was supposed to be entered in minus. It should be minus something, but they didn't do it. And what happens is, Richard, you must have seen this million times, where if the IT can't change, business will evolve around it to adjust. So they will somehow figure out the minusing of the data in their consuming applications. So all that reaches an equilibrium, but now suddenly you pull that data out by a different guy pulls that data out and presents a report to the user without knowing all these nuances. Is going to look, that's where that reaction will be, that this doesn't look correct at all. Things like that. And it happens in IT all the time. I've seen that.
Right. So I would like to comment on that as well. So I mean, I was in BI for quite a long time. So so the processes and the things around that, I'm so intimately aware of it. And that's why when I say that when we talk about representing the enterprise in layers, right? And so this idea of generalized things, these are things absent business logic. And and the reason why I gravitate there is many of my users would come to me and say, if you could just give me the deliveries or shipments or orders. And then they have the know-how of how to actually create the logic. And so the cycles that I used to have with them, I no longer have to have with them because they have access to these entities that are part of the organization. And those entities are reusable for integrations, right? So a lot of times, so this disparateness of our ecosystems, now there's more of a need to have integration. So now I have these entities that exist and they can be structured and reused for integrations. And so that's why I say I think it's in layers, right? And so if you get you design these entities, you design how these entities interact, how they're secured, and then you can let them loose. Almost in the enterprise so that the consumers can do what they need to do. And we found, so I was working with some data scientists that were in our product development organization. And that organization had not had access to the enterprise before we did that particular project. And because we had to build all of these entities for that project, these data scientists were now able to self-serve the enterprise so that they were actually doing ad hoc analysis for even some of our customers, as well as activities and providing metrics out to the organization. And this was absent IT because we provided the enterprise to them in order to do that. And so there's definitely some design and thought that gets put into it, but the number of entities that represent the enterprise is significantly less than the number of use cases for the using of those entities.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really interesting because we spent the last few minutes talking about a different version of connections, people connections.
Yeah,
The business to the technicians, the data science team to the IT team. You mentioned earlier, Terry, the analytics team and the apps team and the integration team are all doing the same thing, only different. And kind of getting them to connect and be smarter about working together, which sounds to me like starting to be good advice and a best practice. So why don't we use that as a transition to the last question, which is, what is your best advice to these IT groups that are working on these connection strategies? And what might be some of their, what would be some things you advise them to get started on tomorrow? And let's start with you, Richard. What's give people some benefit of your knowledge and experience and what they should be thinking about?
So I think, so as it's been suggested by our discussion, I think that it is good strategy to be looking at AI and how it can help automate the work of data integration and building and maintaining data connections. And there's every reason to pursue that and try to take maximum advantage of it. But I think anticipating where we're going with AI, it also makes a great deal of sense to invest in strategies and capabilities that will build up the sort of infrastructure around the meaning and interpretation of data. And so that means data catalogs, data fabrics, data knowledge graphs, perhaps data models, and data governance programs to get the people involved in accumulating and curating the knowledge that's going to make it possible for everyone in the organization to get maximum value from the data and the kind of wondrous AI capabilities that are that are coming.
Those are pretty darn good. Amal, what do you got?
Yeah, I in my interactions, I normally deal with the pipelines, right? The plumbing of data from transactional systems to analytics store and so on. So what I would recommend highly focusing on the keyword there is agnostic, independent Switzerland of data, right? That's what. So if you see a pipeline as a middleware, things around that have been changing over the last 20 years. I mean, it was on-prem data warehouse, the most classical data warehouse. Then there was Hadoop-based data lakes, and then there was cloud data warehouse like Redshift, Snowflake at first. Then there was cloud data lakes, S3, ADLS, and so on. Then people started combining those into lake houses where the lakes and the warehouse remained together, but they were combined. But then when they went finer to create open tables like icebergs and Delta, which can support both kinds of systems. So all these are going to keep changing. You better build your logic in such a way that that can largely be reused after, despite of all of the changes. And you're not hardwired to any of the cloud, any of the endpoint, or any of the pattern. That would be my recommendation. I always use the example of TurboTax. When I interact with TurboTax, I tell it things as they are happening in my life, not in terms of the IRS laws that it represents. The conversion of these to the IRS laws is all taken care of TurboTax. So your middleware should be doing that. That's what I would recommend. Yeah.
So really thinking about the connection between when you're connecting to sources, understand it's best to decouple because to understand those sources are going to be new and more. And they're always going to be a new generation and a new set and a new type, but also more of them because we keep thinking of new ideas like let's have smart shopping carts. Terry, what would you add some best practice or advice and some starting points?
Right. I mean, certainly decoupling and abstraction, right? Those are major things, and generalization, right? And because things happen in layers, and when you generalize, you have a broader base, right? And you can create more value. And the specialization can be within basically in the consumer spaces, and you get more autonomy. And so to me, these are just just good principles. You separate concerns, you loosely couple, you abstract, and you generalize.
Great. Well, we could go on this forever because we've gone beyond technology to pipelines, which are processes. We've gone into people as we talk about organizations and connecting to people. We haven't really spent much time on politics, but people, process, politics, and some technology. Because organizational politics are always quite interesting. But I think we've given the audience quite a bit today. Let me try to summarize some of the main points. We've seen a lot of new technologies in the space. We see AI within the data platform, this vector embedding and similarity in technologies around evolving the ML work around data. Trying to make data more accessible to larger groups, maybe through AI, natural language interfaces. We've seen this democratization and use of catalogs and kind of trying to surface data services to more people, in more types of people and more use cases, some of which are going to in the future be AI use cases. The need for more curation, the classic issues of metadata, catalog, semantics, and maybe we can use some AI agents to help with some of that drudgery, new popular word today. Don't forget the classics like technologies like SQLs, but maybe some things like text to SQL and some of the SQL generation, and more AI agent operations. So those were some of the technologies, some of what we've been seeing. Just these challenges, centralization, decentralization, different types of users. We've got a lot of advice around decoupling and orchestration, thinking in terms of layers, simplification. Don't forget the people. Look at how AI can automate some of that work, but also anticipate that you're going to have AI demands for more and more data, and leverage things like fabrics, curation, knowledge graphs, etc. Think about your pipelines, decouple, generalize, abstract. So a lot of good counsel, a lot of good ways to think about this ever-evolving connection problem. Now, so thank you guys. I really appreciate that. And I think the audience will value that as well. Should the audience want to get more, interact with you in the future or follow up with this sort of thing, how best do people contact you? I'll start with you, Richard. How would you like to have people reach out to you if they want to talk? You're muted again, Richard.
I have a website, wintercorp.com.
Wintercorp.com.
You can find me on LinkedIn, Richard Winter. There are lots of Richard Winters, but if you say Richard Winter Data or Data Warehouse, you'll find me.
All right. Well, I only know one Richard Winter, and that's the data warehouse guy. Terry, how about you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Terry Dorsey. I'm with Denodo.
Okay, great. And so I can go on to the Denodo website as well to see more color. Amal.
Yeah, similar. So I am there on LinkedIn also, Amol Dongre, Informatica, and through Informatica website or through Inside Jam contacts also, they can reach me for sure.
Great. Well, that was a great session today. Again, thank you, everyone. And I hope the audience enjoyed that. Be sure to join our next Jam session, which is in 2 weeks, Share Fox on May 2nd. It's going to be entitled, Are you doing AI or is AI doing you? Interesting.
That sounds very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll be back in a month on May 16th, and kind of apropos to today's conversation. Why can't we be friends? Collaborating with AI agents. So that's what we're going to try to talk to next on my version of the Insight Jam session. So until then, enjoy Connections, both the game and the data integration challenge. I think the game's a lot easier. With that, goodbye, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.